How are you?
All right, I'm Matt Miller. I'm a local artist from Akron, Ohio. Do a lot of large paintings, murals on buildings. I'm also a printmaker, merchandiser, and illustrator. I'm just happy to be here.
And what made you fall on art?
It's really just a calling my whole life. It was always the one thing that I enjoyed doing, despite other career attempts or focuses. It always went back to the art I was making, and eventually that snowballed into the potential of a career, which has turned into a career.
So walk us through, the mural behind you was part of a piece that you did with people from the museum. So
Sure.
Walk us through that process. What did it look like?
Okay, sure. It all started with a general concept to pay homage to Keith Haring in conjunction with the Akron Art Museum Keith Haring show, while still wanting to put my own twist and spin on it while recognizing his influence on my work. And so I built a 12-foot by 7-foot wall out of blank hollow core doors. I then basically made a giant paint by number or coloring book that I brought here. And then with the help of 20 new friends, we basically did all of the large coloring fill-in, and then I came back on my own and did all the highlights and lowlights and final line work during the opening reception.
What was the biggest challenge with this mural in particular?
I actually don't know about that one.
Just
To
so
be
easy.
honest, no, actually, for everything that could go wrong, this one really just all came together really smoothly. All the pieces lined up, and I was afraid that the wall wouldn't stand or things wouldn't line up once I rebuilt it on site, or it would fall on somebody. But none of that happened, so yeah, it was great.
Now, what was your relationship like, or, in terms of inspiration from Keith Haring, before, during, or after? Or was it something that, you're like, oh man, like the more I learned through doing this process, I learned more about Keith, what was that like?
For sure. Growing up, I was a big fan of Keith's work. It was hard not to know it, being a kid of the 80s. His artwork was everywhere, whether I really knew it was his artwork or not. The fluid lines, the cartoony nature, it made the comic books and cartoons I was watching a viable form of artwork. And it was also just cool to see that this awkward Midwest kid was making it huge in the art world and being the same. It gave me, hope and the idea that I could do the same eventually. And then really years later, doing this show, doing this piece and researching Keith again, realizing how great of an influence he had on not just me, but the other artists I was looking at, from the lowbrow pop surrealist movement in California. That was all, cartoons as high art. I don't think that would have been possible without people like Keith doing what he did first. The ability for me to exist in multi-facets of being a designer and a merchandiser. I can sell my artwork as t-shirts and patches and pins and collectibles, mostly because Keith and people like him opened the door to that, the accessibility of art to everyone, and that's something I still strive to do with my own artwork, make sure that everyone can get their hands on it.
Keith was really interested in kind of symbols or figures as language, and this interpretation that, I've created it, you can take it however you want. Do you find that you find that as well in your mural work, is that you're kind of creating pieces that act as this kind of language, or even just this, here's the piece, you take what you need from it?
Yeah, symbolism is a huge part of my artwork. And while I feel I've built a language of symbols that I reuse and they've developed their own meaning for me, I love the idea that each person can get their own feeling, their own interpretation out of it. It might be different every time you look at it too, depending on where you are in your life at that time. Familiar forms can take on whole new meanings, and I love when my artwork can open, that connection or that conversation for people.
And what's your connection to the Akron Art Museum specifically?
Sure. Growing up in Akron for most of my life, my grandma used to pull me out of school on a regular basis and bring me here to the Akron Art Museum so I could learn the real stuff. And some of my earliest memories are being here with her, exploring the collections and the galleries. And then over the years as an artist, practicing in Akron, it's always been great to have a quality and caliber museum to kind of check in on and see the greats, but also the new shows that are coming in, and especially lately, those shows are fantastic. So
what would you say to young artists today, especially, we have such a vast digital world now, and the beauty of it is, of course, the accessibility of art, but some might say, oh, it's tougher than ever to create art, or it's tougher than ever to create my aesthetic, or, oh, I don't know how to pursue, how do I get to this level, of a mural behind you? What kind of words of advice or wisdom would you give to young artists now?
Yeah, don't worry about it. Do the work, do what you're passionate about. Don't worry about how it's going to be received. Show up, come to the museum, go to gallery shows, show interest in what other artists are doing. They'll be your biggest allies and best friends as you build your own career. But make sure you're doing it for yourself first, because otherwise it's not worth it.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and walking us through. So what's next for you, Matt?
Next, I've got a big mural project down in Birmingham that I'm gonna knock out really quick so I can get back to town and do a large mural in Cuyahoga Falls. I'm also working on some digital projects that'll be sent across the country for various locations, some school libraries, things like that. And I'm always down to make band artwork and t-shirts and patches and pins, so I don't know, there's a lot coming.
And if people want to find out more, or maybe even find out how to commission you, where should they go? Website, social?
Sure, I have a website, artofmattmiller.com. You can find me on Instagram at mtmilo, MTMILO. And otherwise, just catch me out on the streets.
Thank you for doing the interview, and yeah.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.